On today's show, part one of our two-part Houston Rockets season preview, taking a look at the biggest questions facing this Rockets team this upcoming season. How will they overcome the Fred VanVleet injury? What will Kevin Durant do for this Houston Rockets offense? Who will be the better point guard by season's end, Thompson or Sheppard, and so much more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Fridays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. Head on over to FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. And joining us now for our Houston Rockets Roundtable Season Preview Edition episode are two of your weekly co-hosts, none other than the Podfather himself, Rockets Wire editor and host of the Logger Line podcast, Ben Dubose. You can track down on Blue Sky at Ben Dubose. And of course, NBA draft enthusiast and diehard Houston Rockets fan, Madison Moore. You can track down at Madman Leaks. Guys, so excited to have you here as we preview yet another Houston Rockets season, one with hopefully maybe some hardware coming, at the end of the pipeline on this one. We're going to be talking about that and so much more on today's episode. First, I want to get into y'all's just general reactions, because we got the news Sunday morning, Kevin Durant inking that 2-year contract extension, very team-friendly terms on that one. Let's start with you, Ben. Give us your quick thoughts on the contract extension for KD.
Well, first off, somehow Kevin Durant is a Sunday morning guy, because if you recall, the trade to Houston broke on a Sunday morning too. Typically, you think of Sunday mornings being slow. Somehow the pre-11 a.m. hours or Sunday morning of where Kevin Durant breaks his news. Anyway,
primetime business for KD Sunday mornings. I like it.
It does make him the topic of discussion for the day. I'll say that. Like, Shams was getting all the spots on the Sunday morning sports centers ahead of the NFL games, which is pretty lucrative. Look, what I will say about the extension, it shows, and the vibes have been there already, but that Kevin Durant is a part of the team. He's not above the team, because really we've seen this theme of sacrifice from both young and old a relative term, but really throughout this roster for over a year now. We saw Alperen Sengun easily could have been a max player this time a year ago. He took a little bit under. Jabari Smith certainly could have done better than what he took. And then you look at the veteran extensions a couple of months ago, Fred VanVleet, Steven Adams. I thought both came in a little under what they theoretically could have been. But I think this is a group that understands that it's really hard to be the last team standing out of 30. So you have to give a little bit if you want to have a team capable of contending with the likes of the 68-win Oklahoma City Thunder, who are not going anywhere. And so it makes sense that if Kevin was drawn to Houston, as clearly he was last year of his contract, he had some leverage. All reports indicated that he wanted to be here, that it wasn't because he wanted it to be just about him. He liked the overall culture. It's been reported, obviously, his relationship with Ime Udoka. But for me, it was just confirmation that, this is not the Kevin Durant show. And that's something that that's a line he offered verbatim last week. Kevin Durant is part of a system, a culture that's already in place, and he's the best player. Let's not get it twisted, but it is noteworthy that he's falling in line with the trend that's already been set. And so that's what it made me think of. It's a sacrifice on Kevin's part. He could definitely get more than that if he waited until unrestricted free agency next summer. I'm so used to saying restricted because of Tari, but yeah, it's just guys up and down this roster have been taking sacrifices for a while to keep this group together and give them a chance to contend. And KD is just the latest in that list.
Yeah, man, definitely. I definitely agree with you, Ben. I mean, I think, I echo everything that you're saying. But once again, another feather in the cap for Rafael Stone. You know, this had early been reported that KD was going to take less than the max almost immediately after the trade was done, or like within the couple weeks, which, you know, through back channels, these guys must have communicated on these things, right? And for once again, Rafael Stone did what Alperen Sengun deal, did it with the Jalen Green deal, where he's just shaving $5-10 million off these deals that could reasonably be much more, and that is just ultimately best for the Rockets team and their winning future and their ability to maintain flexibility, continue to get better, or retain the guys that we already have. So once again, I mean, this team has been a class act in the amount of talent it's been able to occur, right? But once again, we're able to now have these team-friendly or reasonable contracts that will allow us moving forward to maintain our ability to be a good team. And that really goes and has to be echoed for our GM, our front office staff. They've done an amazing job.
And by the way, I thought it was noteworthy that at practice today, I was getting quotes from Ime and Amen Thompson. We didn't get to hear from Kevin because Kevin was made available yesterday, but Ime and Amen addressed the extension. And one of the quotes from Ime was flexibility matters. And that stood out to me because it feels like a Rafael Stone quote. But I do think it speaks to the alignment between Ime, Rafael, ownership led by Patrick Fertitta these days. Like, they've talked about it, how on and off the court, they're very close. I've been told, you know, they're pretty much inseparable during the season. They even do things like play pickleball together away from the court. Like, this is a group that's, you know, their roles are different, but because they care about each other and because they take the time to know how it all works, then you wouldn't have a lot of NBA coaches saying flexibility matters, speaking from a roster management perspective. But Ime can, because he's a part of that process. And that's why it works so well, is that it's not about any one being more important or less important than the other. No, all parts, from the coaching to basketball operations to ownership, they're in alignment. They work together. They talked. And so it was just a little thing, but Ime talking about the importance of flexibility. And it was a quote that was in the context of, you know, KD's not the only guy making a sacrifice. I mentioned Fred. I mentioned Steven. I think you could certainly argue that Sengun and Jabari took sacrifices as well. We'll see what Tari's deal comes in at, but it's clearly an organizational mantra. I don't think necessarily was day one, because they had to overpay a little bit in 23 coming off those last place finishes to get Fred and Dylan. But as soon as the wins started coming, and as soon as it was pretty clear the culture had turned, then yeah, it's accelerated quickly to the point where now Kevin Durant, one of the best players of all time, is willing to do his part to sacrifice as well.
Flexibility is just the new optionality buzzword at this point for the new coaching staff, or for Ime and everybody else around. We know that optionality was a big buzzword a few years ago for Rafael Stone. Ultimately, look, the KD news is fantastic, and I do think one thing that it illustrates too, right, is, you know, shouldn't be a question whatsoever as we're about to navigate into some of our, you know, big questions for the season. But Kevin Durant wants Houston, right? He wants to be here. He's committed to winning at the highest possible level. And this level of sacrifice is, you know, a tool. It's an avenue that we've seen some star players in recent years kind of take, right? Almost most notably recently, James Harden with the Philadelphia 76ers took a significant pay cut for them to be able to go add PJ Tucker, I believe, in the offseason, and go add a couple other extra pieces to be able to flesh out that roster and get it to a level that he thought was championship caliber. And so players do have some sway. They have an ability to make an impact beyond just their on the court production. And this is, you know, one of Kevin's ways of making an impact, seeing that Houston is a roster that can have the chance to compete, not just this season, not just a one-off, but potentially competing for titles for the next 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years down the line, however long Kevin Durant has left, however much game he has left in him before he eventually, fingers crossed, hopefully retires as a member of the Houston Rockets. He's setting this team up for long-term success, not just success in the here and now, which I think is very important to note. We are going to get into our big questions here in just 1 second, but I'm going to put you guys on the spot here. I know I didn't tee y'all up for this, but we've talked about Tari. We've mentioned Tari a couple times here. And so I just very quickly, like, I'm talking like 30 seconds or less, gut check feeling, yes or no on a Tari Eason extension before the season starts. And then if yes, what's the average annual value clock in at? Ben, I'm going to let you take first stab at it.
Yes, I will say 18 to 20, because you now have $25 million in space beneath the second apron next off season. If you get him in the 18 to 20 range, you can pretty much have all the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is about $6 million a year. It's all lining up. The Athletics reported that a deal is expected to get done, so it makes sense financially. You can have Tari and the taxpayer MLE. I think it gets done.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it lines up salary wise. I would agree. I would take a step back between 15 to 20. Ooh. But yes, yeah. I think all of that is in the same range. But Tari's a young player who can probably is going to command a respectable amount of money as a starter. So you're going to have to pony up and pay him, especially with him up as an up-and-coming young player. So I definitely think if the money makes sense, it's good, and I think that aligns well with the team's future.
I'm going to give you Yeah, the analog to Tari, I got you, Ben. The analog to Tari is Toumani Camara just got 4 years, $82 million, which is probably a little unfortunate in these negotiations for the Rockets and for Tari Eason. I'm going to go on the upper end of the spectrum, though. I'm going to say a deal does get done. I think it's going to clock in at $20 million a year average annual value. So 4 years, $80 million for Tari Eason. I don't think the fifth year is going to be in there, even though I'm sure a lot of people would love to see him inked for all 5 years. I think that's where it comes in at. Sounds like we're all in agreement there that the Tari Eason deal does get done ahead of the Monday evening deadline. Coming up, we're going to get into the biggest questions for this season. How will this team overcome? Well, will they be able to overcome the Fred VanVleet injury, and how do they do that? As well as who's going to be the better point guard? What is Durant's impact going to look like on this offense? And so much more. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. The Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monarch. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth between 401ks, savings, different investments. It can be really easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your smartphone. For me, Monarch was a game changer when it came to my monthly expenses, in particular, monthly subscription services, because there's no worse feeling than you see a notification for a $15, $25, $30 charge come through for something that you're not even using. Maybe it's an old gym membership or some online service that you signed up for ages ago, and you tell yourself, "Oh, okay, I'll cancel it. I'll delete it when I get home or whatever." And then you forget, and then fast forward a month, and the same thing happens again. It's annoying, right? With Monarch, you can easily categorize all your monthly spending and then figure out which services you do and do not want to keep. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, guys. Obviously, the big question coming into the season was, how is Kevin Durant going to fit in? And what is he going to look like playing with Sengun and Amin? And then that question had to take a little bit of a backseat to the unfortunate news coming in that the Rockets would be playing without Fred VanVleet this season, which has presented a whole new array of significant questions, right? What will this team look like without Fred VanVleet? Who will emerge between Amin Thompson and Sheppard, or, pick random other guard down the line to kind of help fill that void? What does this team look like offensively now trying to replace Fred VanVleet's minutes? Who does the fifth starter ultimately become? So many other questions just shooting off this major tree chunk of, will this team be able to overcome the Fred VanVleet injury? So I'm going to leave it pretty open-ended for you guys to start there. Madison, I want to start with you. Do you believe this team will be able to overcome this Fred VanVleet injury this season? And what does that look like to you?
Absolutely. I was a bit worried, and guys can quote me from one of my earlier Locked On Rockets pods where I was talking about any injury loss to Fred VanVleet. He's the most important player, especially when a team like this is setting guys up. But just looking at the preseason and the amount of development that has happened over the course of this summer, all our players look like better ball handlers, more equipped to not play point guard, but at least be able to take the pressure off one another as they do it by committee. And Alperen Sengun going through what is probably a huge leap, coming off of the European
Eurobasket.
Eurobasket. Thank you. Coming off of Eurobasket, having an excellent tournament, right? And he just picked up right where he left off here against NBA level competition. I think he's ready to take a role as the facilitator. And all these guys, Amon, Reed, they've come back, improved. They look like they can bring it up the court. And there's going to be a lot of growing pains in the form of turnovers, right? But I think ultimately they're at a place where they're able to battle through that, and they'll become a better team because of it.
So I think offensively, they'll be fine. Like the gravity of Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun is going to be insane. And the opportunities that unlocks for teammates. Like this was a team that ranked number 1 in scoring and number 1 in offensive rating in the preseason for a reason. I actually wonder about them more on the defensive end, which is crazy for a team that was top 5 defense last year, middle of the pack offensively, worse than that in half court. Because in terms of replacing Fred, I think there's 2 primary paths. I think, the ideal is that Reed in year 2 is already ready to be a starting level point guard. And that's probably expecting a bit much, but, you look at what he did against the Hawks and Trae Young the other night. I mean, it's not crazy. And if Reed's ready to be a starting level point guard, it's the same archetype. He probably has more upside, and you just move it along. If Reed isn't quite ready for that type of role, and that's probably a heavy lift at his age and lack of experience, then I think at least with Dorian Finney-Smith sidelined, the next option is to go double big. And offensively, look, the double big lineup and how it crashes the offensive glass, the screen setting with Amin, Jabari, KD, and Steven and Alpi, it's going to put up numbers offensively. The question is defense, because you don't have a lot in terms of denying dribble penetration. Fred was very steady out there. And while the offense will still put up points, you might have more turnovers without Fred, and those can lead to, transition runouts. And, Fred's often the last line of defense. He's very handsy defensively. So that's what I worry about. Offensively, they're going to be fine, which is weird to say for a team that, relied on its defense last year. But defensively, is the double big going to hold up? Will that zone be active enough? And if it's not, is Reed ready? And I guess if Reed isn't ready, then, you do have option C, which is Dorian Finney-Smith, but when is he going to be ready? Like, that's still not clear. And when he is cleared, is he going to be immediately able to play starters minutes? Or, as I suspect, he might be sort of in the 18 to 24 minutes per game range for a while. So offensively, I think they'll be fine. Barring further injuries, I think they have plenty of scoring potential on this team. I do think they'll miss Fred defensively. I think they can overcome it, but they're going to have to be, especially with turnovers, a little more crisp than they were in the preseason.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off that one, Ben, because the defense has been to this point a little bit more concerning to me. And you take everything with a grain of salt because it's preseason, because maybe the guys aren't giving 110% effort and all these different things. But you see all that size that they're putting out there. And yes, it gives them, the inherent advantage when you're, attacking the glass, be it on the defensive glass, offensive glass, whatever. But part of what you were talking about, the turnovers, right? And then igniting some of those transition opportunities. That team with the jumbo lineup out there, they looked a little slow in transition at times, getting back and trying to get the shell of that zone defense set. And I do think that zone defense, similar to like the Warriors back when they ran their like death ball lineup, even though that was their best lineup and it would just decimate opposing teams, they never started with it. They didn't run with it. They didn't use it too much, because when you start doing one thing too much, right, eventually teams will develop counters. They'll figure out the weaknesses of it, and they'll start poking the holes in it. And the thing that I don't want for this Rockets team this season is for them to lose what it feels like is a significant competitive edge, going to that double big lineup a bit more situationally rather than relying on it for the overwhelming majority of their minutes. I do think that's where you get into the danger of like, okay, well, teams are going to start to figure out where the weak spots are in the zone. They're going to figure out how to, attack and create cross matches in transition. And then kind of that's where you're picking apart the zone, because if you get Sengun or Steven Adams cross-matched on a guard in transition, or if one of those guys is suddenly at the top of your 2-3 zone instead of at the back line where they're supposed to be, then you're going to run into some of those issues. And if the opposing team, if all they have to do is just pick up the pace a little bit in transition, then you're going to run into those issues more often than not. Part of that can just be get back, get set a little bit quicker, things like that. but I hear you on the defensive concerns, and that's kind of ultimately where I'm at, because you lost the voice, the head of the snake defensively, if you will. Even if Amin Thompson was the best defender, you lost Dylan Brooks, and that's a pretty major loss. Then you lost Fred VanVleet. Those were your two culture setters. Those were the two guys that were responsible in a very big way for the turnaround of this Houston Rockets defense and for instilling the identity that created this, this culture, this ecosystem that Ime Udoka has fostered. But now they have to do it without both of those guys. And that's going to be a very tall ask for this team. I wouldn't be shocked, and we'll talk about this when we get to our bold predictions episode next, but I wouldn't be shocked if this team actually regresses a little bit defensively. Yeah. But if they take a significant step forward on offense, as long as they're top 10 in both categories, they'll still be in full-blown championship contention mode. Now, as the kind of extension of this discussion, and how will they overcome Fred VanVleet's injury? There's a lot riding on two names in particular. We already talked about the fact that Alperen Sengun feels like he's ready for a bigger role, a more sizable role as the primary initiator, leading playmaker, those kinds of things. But between the point guard battle, if you will, of Amin Thompson and Reed Sheppard, this is going to be a tough prediction here, but I want y'all's thoughts. By the end of the season, who do we think is going to look to be the better point guard? Amin Thompson or Reed Sheppard?
I think by the end of the season, fans will want the ball in Reed's hands more. And it's just because his processing and decision-making is much more stable than Amin's, right? Amin is still going to be an amazing player, but his ability to play well on and off the ball in so many different ways is just, he's not going to need the ball to be super duper effective, right? But when the team, I think stability is going to be this team's main offensive weakness, the not turning the ball over. And I think once Reed settles in, calms down, and the game slows down for him. And over the course, and I think there will be some growing pains, but over the course of the season, I think as he catches up, he's going to be an excellent decision maker. And we're going to kind of want to see more from Reed. We're going to want the ball in his hands more. We're going to want that stability that Fred once has. And on the team right now, he is the most likely to bring that type of upside.
I agree with Madison if you add the distinction of by the end of the season, as he did.
Yes.
Yeah, day one, it's going to be a men simply because, look, Reed's 21 years old. He barely played in year one, and this is sort of the quarterback, at least of a traditional NBA team, the way it's run. And so I think it's a bit much to expect Reed to be that guy day one. But I agree with you, by the end of the season, he has more potential in that role. And I also think, there's only been 2 preseason games with the big three of Amin, KD, and Sengun playing, but I think you've already seen clues that the Rockets do want to use Amin off ball a decent bit, even if they run this double big lineup. The first game that KD played was the one against the Jazz when they put up 140, and that was when they were really running, it felt like Shin Hub. And so Amin he did bring up the ball to the half court line, but then they would kick it to, KD and then to Sengun near the top of the key, and they would unlock Amin as a cutter, as an off-ball mover. Mm-hmm. And then in game 3, when they started the double big, you saw a little bit less of Shin Hub. Maybe the floor was a little more compressed, but I thought that Amin would bring it to half court, and then you saw more offense generated through KD and Jabari, at least initiating. What happened on a lot of the sets was, KD would draw a second defender, and then they'd kick it, and there'd be a 4-on-3. Sometimes they just let Jabari go eat against the weakest defender. In that case, it was Jordan Poole. But I think there's some clues that even if Amin is the point guard in name and he brings the ball off the court, because, there's going to be some guys that will test you and Jose Alvarado style guard you 94 feet. But I think they still want to use Amin as an off-ball guy to some degree. He still has a lot of value with his body type in that role. And so because of that, I don't think Amin will ever be the full-blown point guard. Mm-hmm. And so I think by the end of the year, when Reed is more developed, he'll be a better fit for that role.
I'm with you guys on the Reed front here. Like, genuinely, I think that I've never had any concerns about what I think Reed is eventually going to be able to bring to the table offensively. And we've seen with pretty good regularity now that when he is given a bigger role, when he's really given an opportunity in some of those games where he started, and obviously most notably recently against the Hawks there in that final preseason game, he shows out in a big way. The biggest thing for Reed is going to be ultimately keeping that aggressiveness, keeping that level of confidence in place, even when he's not the guy out there by himself, right? He needs to be able to be that aggressive and that confident when playing alongside Kevin Durant and Sengun and Amin. And I think there are times where he gets a little bit too passive out there, or maybe overthinking and pressing a little bit because he's worried about making sure those guys who are, higher in the pecking order than him, however you want to view it, are getting their touches or getting their shots. And that needs to not be the case, right? These guys are all so such talented basketball players that Reed just needs to go out there and play his game. And by doing that, it'll just be an overall better product. I'm with you guys there on that front. I really do think that Reed is going to be, by the end of the year, feel like the better overall point guard prospect. Was there something else you wanted to add, Madison?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, not just for the offense to run more smoothly, right? But also giving Amin Thompson the ability to not have to dribble the ball up will also improve our defense by allowing him to be the defensive stopper and the culture setter defensively that we're losing, and we talked about earlier, right? I mean, we know he has the talent. We know Amin is our best defender, but it is extremely hard to play super high level basketball on both ends of the court, right? And with Amin taking on a larger offensive role of bringing the ball up, setting guys up, that is going to take a toll on him over the course of an 82-game season in establishing himself defensively. So just having Reed there and his ability to alleviate that pressure on Amin, that could alleviate a lot of our problems defensively as well.
Coming up, Kevin Durant's offensive impact for this team this season, Alperen Sengun's All-NBA chances, and more. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you do not want to miss out on. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, $5 only, and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You just pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. And the app is great because it gives you so many different ways to play. You can build out different parlays. You can try different player props. You can even follow the live betting lines during the games, or just maybe keep it simple. Go bet on the outright favorite for this year's Super Bowl. But there are so many different ways to get involved. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a bit of a headache sometimes between waiting in queues and surprise fees and prices that jump up right before checkout. It can be really easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team, go say what's up to the Rockets, all that good stuff, right? That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I love Game Time. I'll never use another ticketing app ever again because they are fully transparent from start to finish. The price that you see in the little bottom corner of your screen as you're selecting your tickets, adding more to your cart, that's the price that you're going to pay at the end of the checkout process. They are fully transparent, no hidden fees, no price gouging. It's awesome. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms do apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Be on the lookout for our next episode, part 2 of our season preview, where we're going to be doing our bold predictions. We'll be taking a look at the win-loss record, the offense, the defense. We'll each bring a bold prediction of our own to the episode. It's going to be a lot of fun, so be on the lookout for that next one in your episode feed ahead of the opening slate of the season, Rockets versus Thunder. Guys, it's going to be such a good game on opening night of the NBA season. All right, let's get to this next one here, and it feels a shame that we're burying KD all the way in the third segment. I guess we talked about him in the first segment, but what are your expectations for this team offensively with the addition of Kevin Durant this season? Madison, tee us off.
Yeah, my expectations is I think this offense is going to take quite a leap. I think the ability of KD, the offensive attention, and not just that, but the overall development of all the young guys around Kevin Durant. I think Jabari Smith Jr. is going to really start to step into himself as the ultimate release valve, right? And the beneficiary of so many different double teams, right? We already see him. We've already seen it in the preseason. And not just that, but Kevin Durant's leadership and commanding and telling guys, hey, I want you to be aggressive. You can do these things, like he told Jabari to punish Jordan Poole in the post. I think his leadership, his ability to show guys what a superstar work ethic is and also the overall development of the young guys. I think they've gone through the playoffs, which has allowed them to have the confidence and the skill level to finally be these upper tier role players as well in their roles, right? Is now going to complement Kevin Durant in such a humongous way. And I think this kind of balance of the two is going to be very beneficial for this offense. And like we spoke, the defense may take a half step back, but I expect the offense to take a full step forward.
Yeah, I saw Kendrick Perkins say last week over at ESPN that he thinks the Rockets will have the best offense in the NBA. I think that might be a little bit of a stretch, but I'll go top 5. I think that's absolutely in play. Like, it's not just about Kevin individually. Is he an upgrade at the tip of the spear perimeter scorer over Jalen Green? Of course he is. He's a better shooter. He can score at all 3 levels. He's one of the best scorers in NBA history. And so, yeah, relative to last year's model, he's a huge upgrade in that role. But I also think it's huge for the rest of the team. You talked about Jabari and how he can feast against some of those advantage matchups, and Jabari's taken some clear leaps, in my opinion, with regards to skills development this offseason as well. I also think that Kevin's going to make life so much easier for Alperen Sengun. I don't think Sengun in his first 4 seasons in Houston has ever had a teammate with anywhere near the gravity that Kevin Durant has in terms of the attention he draws on the floor. Obviously, a shooter of that caliber can really space. But beyond that, I don't think people around the league are prepared for how different this offense is going to look, because it's not just KD. Sure, that'll unlock things for the other 4 players he's playing with. But when you give the ball to Sengun in the high post, you actually can play something closer to a true Shin hub now, because there's so much more movement. You know, we talked late last year about the high-low game with Steven Adams and how those two work well together. Amen is no longer the only guy that moves off the ball. Jabari has shown in the preseason he's doing much more off-ball cutting, diving to the rim. Reed Sheppard isn't a cutter, but he is an off-ball mover in terms of how he consistently works to get open for his shots. And, you know, that's been a big issue for Sengun in the last couple of years. You know, we saw these flashes of elite playmaking his first 2 seasons, and then it feels like, or at least the perception has been, that it's leveled off. Well, some of it's been the offense got pretty stale, and there's only so much you can do if you don't have that many shooters around you, and Amen's the only guy that's really moving without the ball. Well, KD's going to make life a lot easier for the 4 guys just to begin with because of the attention he draws. And you also have a much more cohesive, free-flowing system that's going to be conducive to Alperen's success. And so the fact that Kevin not only is an upgrade over Jalen Green, which he clearly is, but the fact that he should also unlock a much better version of your second best player, a guy in Alperen Sengun who was probably already a top 25, top 30 player, an all-star last year. And, you know, independent of KD, he was probably going to get better already just from, you know, last year was an outlier in a bad way shooting year for Alpi. I think he's improved on that. Eurobasket was a clear tell there. But I think KD is going to lead to a much better year for Alperen Sengun. I think we'll see much more of Sengun as a passer relative to the last couple of years. And I think that's going to be to the betterment of the overall team.
I think too, you know, the inverse of that is we're also going to see Kevin Durant playing with the singularly most talented big man that he's ever played with, not counting Draymond Green, but the, you know, very stylistically different types of bigs. And even then, Alperen Sengun is a much more offensively gifted big than Draymond is. You know, obviously you factor in Draymond's playmaking ability, yes, but these are, you know, 2 very different types of players. And so giving Kevin that level of a pick and roll partner, that guy that he can operate with in the 2-man game, you put those 2 guys in an empty corner action with the other 3 guys on the other side of the floor. What does the defense even do? Like, that's a gigantic pickle to be put in. And I do think that at some point, by not even the mid-season mark, I feel like we're going to get 2 months into the season and people are going to start talking about Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun as one of the best duos in the NBA because they complement each other so beautifully in whether it's Sengun with the ball in his hands or Kevin with the ball in his hands. They can make life easier for one another. It's almost like they're a match made in heaven as far as what it's going to look like, you know, poetry on a basketball court. So I'm very excited to see that 2-man game ultimately blossom. And that carries us directly into my next big question here for you guys is, what does it take? What will it take? And what does it look like for Alperen Sengun to earn all NBA honors this season?
Yeah, I'll go first because I already touched on it to some extent. It's the passing, in my opinion. I think the defense has already taken a step forward. He needs to finish better, but we already knew that. And Alperen said that coming off of last season. He thinks that was an outlier. And in the preseason and in Eurobasket, he's already shown clear signs that it was indeed an outlier. I just think for him to get to that true top 10, top 15 level, Nikola Jokic is a high bar, but something closer to the model, and that it's not just the 20 and 10. But
hey, Michael Malone thinks the Rockets can do some Jokic stuff with Sengun.
Yeah, no,
that's enough of an endorsement.
I don't know
for
if
me.
he's going to be. Yeah, I'm just saying he's not going to be full blown Nikola Jokic this year. That might be a bit aggressive, but have him much more consistently in the 7-8 assists per game. I think he's capable of that. I mentioned, the gravity of KD, more off-ball guys this year. Should also mention, Tari Eason is an off-ball guy, but he only played in 79 combined games the last 2 years because of leg injuries. Now he is fully healthy. So I think overall this is a system that's much more conducive to success for every level of Alperen Sengun. Not that he wasn't succeeding before, but I think you can do more now. And I think as far as him getting that All-NBA level, it's becoming not just a dominant low-post scorer and a rebounder, but, getting to that elite big man passing level, which he's shown flashes of in the past. He hasn't done it consistently. I think this is the year that he potentially can. And if he does, he can be an All-NBA player.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that, Ben. I mean, that was actually my biggest point. I mean, we got to see it in Eurobasket, and then in the preseason, his decision making is just so much more consistent and faster. It's so much quicker. He's making these decisions. It's before you even can see it, and we're watching from the TV screen or from the arena with his understanding of the game is what's really taking a leap here, and we're really starting to see that take off. Now, of course, if he adds a more consistent jump shot, that will make everything come together more. So when guys try and sag off and take away cutters, he'll be able to punish them in those areas. But like you said, Ben, I think if he stays at this level he was last year defensively, that's all you need to be a star in this league.
Yeah, I mean, you had a top 5 defense with Alperen Sengun last year, so I don't even think that's the question anymore. I think it's more offensively that would take him from that top 25 level that I think he's at now to being a legitimate top 10, top 15 level guy.
And I fully agree here. I think that you guys hit the nail on the head with the playmaking element. And I do think there is a world where Alperen Sengun could just level up or get to a more consistent place as a playmaker this season. And he's already got enough, everything else going for him in his game that would, give him a very, very strong chance at being, on, the All-NBA list this season. He was already just, 1 vote shy of earning All-NBA honors this past season, as good as he was. And also, there's a little bit of a team success angle in there that has to happen as well. But I think, by and large, we agree that this Rockets team will hopefully, barring anything catastrophic from happening, should have a fair enough level of team success that, it puts him in any of these conversations kind of by default. But I will say, I'll angle it away from the playmaking for my thoughts on this, just because we've harped on this before with him, but it's not a necessity. But we have seen a kind of a renewed level of confidence in his shot making ability outside of just around the rim, right? We knew that the offense was going to be kind of a refreshed focal point for him coming into the season, the finishing around the rim, but he also looks to be a bit more confident pulling up from the mid-range. We saw him do that a little bit in preseason. We saw him taking threes in Eurobasket and taking them in confidence, in rhythm, within the flow of the offense, not hesitating on them. Ime's talked in the past before about how Alp kind of falls in love with pump faking nobody at the 3-point line, and then it just leads to clunky offense when he does that. So if Alperen Sengun's able to truly level up as a shooter this season in regards to that confidence from the mid-range, confidence from 3, and I'll also extend that to his confidence from the free throw line, because he gets to the foul line so often as a big, and potentially maybe even more this season, given the fact that he'll get so many easy opportunities where defenses are going to have no choice but to foul him. Otherwise, giving up easy layups and dunks right at the rim off of a Kevin Durant double team or something like that. Seeing him hit those free throws at a slightly more consistent clip, if he can get up to that 75-80% range instead of, hovering and flirting with, the 69%, which was not nice. These past couple seasons, that'll certainly help level up his overall scoring, his overall offensive efficiency. And those are things that'll certainly give him more of an argument to be on that All-NBA squad by season's end. All right, guys, last thing that I have here for us in our big questions for this episode. I'm going to put the caveat that you can't pick the Thunder. All right. So that we're eliminating them. They're the defending champs. They're the favorites. All right. So let's make it a little bit more complicated. Who in the Western Conference is going to be the biggest barrier or the worst matchup or just the toughest draw for the Houston Rockets? What's the team you don't want them to face that, you're legitimately a little worried of in the Western Conference, and you can't pick the Thunder?
So the easy pick will be the Nuggets, but I'm actually not going to go in that direction. I'm actually a little bit lower on Denver than the consensus, because I actually do think, especially from a chemistry perspective, there could be a little more of a hit than people think going from Michael Porter Jr. to Cam Johnson. I think people judge MPJ through the contract, which is pretty bloated, but he had really good chemistry with Murray and Jokic, and Cam starting from square one. I think he can get there, but going from a situation with no expectations in Brooklyn to the third member of that big three alongside Murray and Jokic and, a pressure cooker environment that, MPJ already won a championship in that role in. I think there's a lot of people that looked at him strictly through the lens of, a $35 to $40 million player in which he felt a little bit underwhelming. He was actually a lot more durable than he got credit for the last couple of years. And that might be the Mizzou homer in me talking, but
I was going to say, get your Mizzou propaganda out of here, Ben.
I am. Well, too. I got the shirt and the hat. Mizzou had a huge win against Auburn yesterday. Got to throw that out there, MIZ. But no,
Jabari's going to at you on Twitter. Calm down.
I know. But in all seriousness, Denver's going to be a good team. I do think people are overstating their offseason moves just a little bit because they're looking at MPJ strictly through the lens of his contract and not through his actual contributions as a basketball player, which especially when he was healthy, not the version with the bad shoulder last playoffs, but when he was healthy, was actually a pretty good fit for that roster that was so lethal on the offensive end of the floor. People are going to hate me for saying this. I do worry a little bit about the Warriors. I think Steph and Jimmy, if there's one thing you worry about with the way the Rockets are constructed, they're going to run a lot of zone. They have the perimeter shooting with Steph, and they have two guys on the perimeter who can make plays and break the defense down. We know the history they have against the Rockets. I think the Rockets are a better team than when the Rockets lost to the Warriors in 7 games last April and May. So in theory, a much better Rockets team, and you already took them to 7, should put them over the top. But this is also going to be the first year that, the Warriors will have a full year of Jimmy Butler to sort of integrate and get into the Steve Kerr system and the culture, all that stuff. So I'm not counting out the Warriors until they are done. I think they're being slept on a little bit. A full year of Jimmy, assuming he's healthy, that can be a pretty good team. They've got a ton of experience. And so maybe it's the scorned Rockets fan in me, but I'm going with Golden State as a team that, for historical reasons, for matchup reasons, worries me a little bit.
And they added Al Horford, and I don't know if any of the three of us could emotionally handle another loss that they hand to the Warriors. I might have to walk away from it all if it happens.
And think of how jacked Draymond would be for a series against Kevin Durant.
Oh God! Oh God! And I can feel it now. The sports gods are gonna make it happen because the narratives around that series would be absurd.
And I will say, like, I know the Rockets took them to 7, and I think that is a testament to, how hard last year's team played. But if Steph Curry doesn't blow out his hamstring, which that's probably due to the defense, and Thompson played over 7 games. But if Steph doesn't blow out his hamstring in the first game of that second round series against the Timberwolves, I think the Warriors were going to cruise in that round to the Western Conference Finals. So just as a, comparison, the Timberwolves have been to the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row. I feel pretty confident that if Steph doesn't get hurt, they're beating Minnesota in that second round series last year. And then we're perhaps talking about them a little bit differently.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with Ben. It's the Warriors. It's the experience. It's the famous Rocket Tommy.
Never underestimate the heart of a champion.
Yeah, never underestimate them. And those guys have championship pedigree. They know how to get things done. And I think it is poetic that Kevin Durant, who has a, let's say, shaky relationship with the guys over there at Golden State, was perfect to come to a team who has a very shaky relationship with the Warriors as well. I think this stuff is written by the basketball gods, honestly. And I think the young guys, this new young Rockets core, needed to go through some things against the Warriors to make this rivalry real again, because this isn't the James Harden Rockets, right? This is a new Rockets team, and the Warriors put us out of our misery in that first year where we had a chance to make the playoffs. They didn't allow us to make the playoffs. And then in the first round, they take us to 7 and beat us again. Those young guys have invested stake now against this team. They're not going to like them anymore. You know what I mean? Draymond Green on the podcast talking smack. You know what I mean? We needed this. This is written by the gods. And I do think when I look up and down the Western Conference, it also speaks a lot about the Western Conference. I'm not really scared of anybody but the Thunder, right? And so if you have to take the Thunder out, that is the only team I really think has the, even though they may not be as good in the regular season, they have the pedigree to reach another level that is championship tier.
I agree with the points you guys are making about the Warriors. And to your point about the the poetic nature of it, Madison. The Rockets just got KD, and he's got some, scoring relationships with the guys over there in Golden State. It was supposed to be poetic last season with the young Rockets ousting the old Warriors. That was the poetry last season, and they failed to deliver. So, I'm not buying any more poetry. I keep me away from get me out of the poetry section. I don't want to be anywhere near those books. Just anybody but the Warriors in the first round, please, for my own mental sanity.
Although, if the Rockets beat the Warriors last year, if they close out that series in 7, do we think Kevin Durant is still here? I'm not sure he is. And so from that standpoint,
maybe not.
Maybe it's fitting that you acquire KD and he's the one to get you over that Golden State.
Okay, maybe I can subscribe to that notion a little bit. Look, I appreciate the polls for the Warriors. I think it's a great call, and it's certainly a team that I want no part of at down the line in the postseason. I gotta look at Denver though, and I do think that to your point, Ben, about people maybe overhyping Denver a little bit. I think that the moves that they made this offseason, they're a deeper team now, and I don't even think that MPJ was truly the part of that big three that made that team go. I think it's Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon is the more important member to that team as far as the overall success of it. I know that MPJ shouldered a bit more of an offensive load when as far as
I was thinking
scoring responsibility, but but Aaron Gordon is the Swiss Army knife, the do-it-all man for that team, and he also took on a much bigger scoring load when needed. When MPJ's was playing with a pulled pork shoulder and it was about to fall out of its socket last season. So I think that the additions that they made, bringing back Bruce Brown, adding Jonas Valanciunas, adding all the depth pieces that they got this past offseason, they've addressed their biggest weakness, and that was the fact that when Jokic stepped off the court, the Nuggets would just crumble, and they just looked terrible without him out there on the floor. They've addressed that to a degree this offseason, and so I'm a little worried about the Nuggets, a team that did take the defending champion OKC Thunder all the way to 7 games themselves in the second round of the playoffs before ultimately falling, and that was with a good chunk of their roster injured or missing or not playing at 100% capacity. And it took a very, very good Thunder team and a lot of non-call fouls from Alex Caruso guarding Jokic to be able to make it through that series. So I could absolutely see kind of a Denver renaissance this season where they play with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They feel like they're underrated or not looked upon as favorably as they should be, coming off a title just a couple of years removed from their title run. So I'm looking at Denver as the team that I really would hate to see them in a 7-game series. It would be fantastic basketball watching Jokic and Sengun go back and forth, that big man battle, watching everything go down in that series. But just from a sheer, they scare me a little bit. It's got to be Denver for me.
I don't think you're wrong. I'll just say with Bruce and Valanciunas, I think those will be more regular season edition than playoffs. And I was looking at it more from a playoff matchup perspective.
Well, I do think Cam Johnson is a very underrated move. I think he fits better than MPJ. He's going to be able to provide the same amount of shooting. And he actually has played in the NBA Finals and played amazing in the NBA Finals. I think he's going to make their defense better. He's a much better defender than MPJ. And I think that is really the key factor that upgrades that team, not so much the others.
Boo, Mizzou, boo. We don't like Mizzou. No.
What year did Cam play in the NBA Finals? I thought he did 21. You're right. He did have the 1 year.
And he was great.
He was great. No, absolutely.
No, the thing about 21, I think of the Bucks Nets series as the NBA Finals. So that's sort of my revisionist history. No, you're right. You're right.
All right. Well, with that, we want your thoughts on all the big questions that we discussed in today's episode. Give us your thoughts in the YouTube comments about how this team overcomes the Fred VanVleet injury. Who's going to be the better point guard by the end of the season between Thompson and Sheppard? What is KD going to do for this team offensively? Can Alperen Sengun make an all-NBA team this year? And who are you most afraid of in the Western Conference? Who's the biggest barrier to the Rockets' success, that is? Give us your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Let us know wherever everybody can track you down at, guys. Ben, you go first, then Madison.
Yep, Ben Dubose on all the socials, and you can read my work at rocketswire.usatoday.com. All the daily coverage of your Houston Rockets.
Yeah, you can find me at MadmanLeaks on Twitter. Come talk Rockets basketball and NBA draft.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.